contributions policy. So we'll obviously take the paper as read, but do you want to just give us a brief intro? And could you just talk about the timing of the consultation, please?
So we've had several briefings with Council throughout the course of this policy review, most recently on the 29th of October and then the 26th of November. And in those briefings we discussed the changes to the policy, the changes to catchments and the draft charges. So we are seeking your endorsement to go out for consultation on the draft policy. That's attachment A to your report. Draw your attention to attachment B, which is the policy options analysis, and then attachment C, which is the changes to charges. We have also included some comparative examples so you can see how the charges have changed between the 2016, 2021 and 2024 policies. So subject to your approval, we will commence consultation in the new year. Consultation will commence on the 14th of January and go to the 19th of February. We will notify stakeholders as part of the consultation, and we'll ask them to let us know if they need more time. We try to be as flexible as possible.
Great, thank you. Victoria, then, Yanni, you had some wording, I think, from memory. But we'll go Vic and then come to you. Yep.
Thank you. You may have answered the question in that last comment. I just want to understand if there's any room to move on that consultation date. I'm just conscious that mid-January, still a lot of people are away for a good chunk in January, and then there's only a short period of time. I wonder whether we preempt requests for extension later on by actually changing the date now.
We've given lots of heads up, and so far it's seemed okay, and it's 5 weeks as opposed to 4, and we were going to give them, through the Developers Forum, a heads up on exact dates today, and we can ask if there's any requirement for extensions today as well.
Victoria, are you signalling?
Is that...
I'm just thinking of shortcutting it. Do you want just the consultation to run to like the end of February? Is that
if at all possible. I mean, we could just determine that today and then...
Yeah, then it saves backwards and forwards.
I need to understand how that impacts anything else which is going up for consultation at that time.
Yeah. Okay, we'll come back to that. Aaron?
Yeah, just a question around remissions. And it looks like our remission policy will be tighter or more difficult. And one of the questions I'd raise when we're going through PC14 is around commercial centres, that to encourage, because we're still building single level commercial properties in main centres, which kind of is the complete opposite to what the government and we've been trying to achieve. And we could be using a remissions policy to get apartments above shop space in commercial areas. But that doesn't seem to, this doesn't allow for that, or it would allow for that.
So the current remission policy provides for the council to grant a remission in unique and compelling circumstances. The advice of staff is that we have never ever met that threshold. So council is essentially making a Section 80 decision when you grant remissions. So we are suggesting taking it out of the policy. The alternative would be to clarify the remission policy to note that it needs to be the development itself that is unique, and that granting the remission does not set a precedent going forward. We do have a rebate policy which gives council the ability to create a rebate scheme if there is a particular strategic goal that council has in mind that you are looking to incentivise. So we've had rebate schemes for the central city, non-residential and residential, which have closed, and we currently have them for social housing and Papakainga. The rebate scheme sits outside of the policy, so any sort of any work in that space would fall outside of this review.
So it is outside this, so
yes,
we can
there's
still...
a separate policy.
So in the future we could choose a couple of areas and experiment with it and go, hey look, if you throw apartments above there, there's 0 DCs, but you've got to do it in the next 24 months, that type of thing.
Rebate schemes need to be one tool in the toolbox of a strategic goal that council is trying to achieve. So as part of other sort of planning measures that maybe were in place, a rebate scheme could be appropriate, and we can explore that if there is interest.
I just didn't want us to be doing something that then excludes that, but that's separate, so that's fine. Thank you.
Great. Andre, and then Yanni, sorry man, I'll come back to you.
Thank you. Just looking at the contributions for the central area, Are you able to tell me what the current development contributions are for the central area?
So the central charges are $29,000.
That's what they are currently?
No, they're currently about 7 to 8, depending on where in the central city you are. They have gone up across the entire city. We had a briefing on this on the 26th of November to explain what has happened.
So that they haven't gone up across all of the city, because in Halswell they're staying about the same, or if anything, getting a discount.
So they've gone up. Central has gone up sort of 7, 8 to 29. East has gone up from 7 to 13 to 29.
Yep.
South has gone up from 8 to 23 to 32. West is where we haven't seen as much change, so it's gone from like 23 to 32 to 37, and then north is I think it's about 13 to 30, and it's gone up to 37. Banks Peninsula is where we haven't seen a ton of change, and Akaroa has gone down a little bit because the growth projections have gone up a little bit.
So Halswell is currently 32,800, not including GST, so 34 including.
Yeah, that's just a random property in Halswell. So Halswell charges are quite, there's quite a big range, just because you've got a lot of sort of established areas as well where the DCs are a little bit lower. We've just picked some random properties just so you could see how the charges have changed.
Cool. So I guess what I'm trying to get my head around is you're more than tripling development contributions in the central city, where we're trying to get more housing and we have a goal of people living in the inner city. But development contributions will be around the same for there as they are for outer suburb housing, which requires more infrastructure that you need to build. So I'm just trying to figure out how this is consistent with all of our goals and what we're trying to do, and how that can more than triple, but other areas could stay the same when the infrastructure costs are higher.
So the charges are really the result of the catchments that we draw, and then the projects that are allocated within those catchments.
Yeah.
So we don't find out what the charges are until we get kind of towards the end of the policy review.
Yeah.
So the charges are higher in Central than they were previously, but again, the charges within Central are relatively consistent with other councils. We just had a uniquely low DC policy charges in 2021.
Okay.
If there was, again, as I said before, regarding the rebate scheme, if there is a particular strategic goal that council has in mind, a rebate scheme may be a better way of addressing that, as opposed to some kind of cap.
Well, we have a goal with...
Andre, if I jump in, I know exactly what you mean, which is we're trying to encourage people into the CBD,
yes,
yet we're tripling the DCs.
Yep.
So what you're saying is, what's the signal we can send as a council to encourage more houses in the CBD?
Yeah, my next question was, the goal is around within the 4 Avs, right? It was 20,000 people or whatever it is. Had you considered a catchment for the 4 Avs? Because I noticed that the 4 Avs covers 2 different catchments, right? With in this policy.
Because the charges have gone up everywhere, it doesn't, and the charges are relatively flat with the exception of West and North. Messing with the catchments wouldn't necessarily result in DCs being particularly low in the central city. We don't know what they would be, but that's not necessarily a guarantee that would produce a DC charge that is quite low in the central city, because it depends on what projects are allocated as benefiting the central city and how much growth is projected in our growth model within the central city. So it's not necessarily, redrawing the catchments isn't necessarily a guarantee that you would get lower charges in certain parts of the city. We tend to find Greenfield, what was our Greenfield catchment, was higher because the cost to deliver projects in Greenfield areas was more.
Yeah.
And when the growth model allocates growth, it's allocating it where there is capacity. So it will allocate to the point where it's gone, there's no more capacity here, and then it won't allocate there anymore. So changing the catchments won't necessarily change the amount of growth that is expected in a place, because that's coming out of the growth model.
Yeah. yeah, I guess where I'm going with that is you don't need to build great big detention basins and everything for apartments in a city. Yeah, they'll be paying about the same in development contributions as housing around the outskirts of Christchurch that requires facilities that cost tens of millions of dollars to build. But just on that, what I'm trying to figure out in the list of projects, the amount that it shows, is that the amount that is still to be collected? I'm trying to figure out what has already been collected for some of those projects.
The schedule of assets won't say what has been collected. It's just it just notes the total budget for that project and then how much is allocated to growth. So we don't include the current collections for each project in the DC policy.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. So each of these figures is just the total cost, but to find out what has been collected so far would be a matter of asking for an update. Basically.
Yeah, we don't have that on hand.
Cool. Beautiful. Thank you. And just lastly, neighbourhood parks. So for Hallsville, for example, the amount's increasing by 1,000%. So from around 500 to 5,000 collected for neighbourhood parks. So in the context of Hallsville, 3,000 homes to come, we'll collect around $15 million for neighbourhood parks. What are those parks?
So
and what's defined as a neighbourhood park?
Neighbourhood parks is a program. I don't know if we've got. Yeah, it's a program of work.
Yeah.
But I can't speak to that project. I can't speak to that itself because I'm not an asset planner.
Okay.
So I've got.
Cool. Thank you.
I can come back if that's okay, Andrew. I've got Yanni, then Aaron, then James. And I'm just getting some advice from the chief executive.
My question's not too dissimilar, but I look at some of the catchment maps and I just have concern. And again, this was raised in the briefing that like you've got in some areas, for example, you've got in the Linwood catchment or the East catchment, you've got areas that have got greenfield, lots of greenfield growth, and you've got brownfield areas like Linwood and Woolston. So I'm just trying to understand, is there a way that, because obviously it's important we consult, is there a way that we can have an option around smaller catchments, which would sort of pick up some of the concern, I think, around how the DCs are being allocated?
So changing the catchments is a really significant change to this policy. It's the reason that we had multiple briefings on the catchments because it's the first thing that gets done, and then we do the cost allocations. We go through the entire capital program and do the cost allocation. So identify growth and then identify which catchments benefit from that infrastructure. And then we have to do all the data inputs for the schedule of assets and then run the model. So all of that takes about 8 weeks. So if we were to change the catchments, that is a really significant change, and we wouldn't probably have a draft policy to you until probably April.
But like, how is it fair that the brownfield development, like in Linwood and Woolston and Avonside and even Richmond, is paying for the growth projects that go all the way out to Preston's?
So when we draw the catchments, we have to balance a few things. One is household growth. We also have to include business growth and keep that in mind and make sure that we're not splitting commercial centres and business areas. The other thing that we kept in mind this time was, you might remember when we did the last rec review, we did a bit of work around asking people where they go, where they do their shopping, where their communities are. So as we drew the catchments, that was also kept in mind around where are people using infrastructure and facilities and how do we draw these. So if you go too small, keeping that balance right becomes really hard. And as Alan said, often those projects are allocated across multiple catchments anyway. So it may not necessarily make a difference in terms of how that split happens.
Right.
It would just
I'm just wondering whether, given the level of questions, I've just been talking with the team, whether we actually just park this and we'll schedule a workshop in January. Because there still seems to be some fundamental things that I'm just conscious once we go out, we've effectively got an approach And I'm just wondering would that be something people are more keen with?
I mean, I guess the thing I was keen on is I understand they need to get it out for consultation, but I want to have as much flexibility within the consultation document that if people make submissions they want X, Y, Z, we don't get told we didn't consult on it, we can't do it.
And I just want to be clear on that, and I'm not sure we're going to get that outcome out of sitting in the meeting today to do it.
You'll delay the whole consultation. They want to go out in January.
Yeah, but we've got to get it right, and I don't want to do it on the fly here. So
I think we need advice on
just
that.
to be clear, you do, if you go out to consultation, you do need an agreed proposal to go to consultation. So that if you can't just go out as in give us your view about anything, we haven't got any idea yet. You do need a firm proposal. You go to consultation. You can vary it after consultation, but if you do need more time to get a proposal, you could defer this till the next year, do a workshop, and then come back with a firm proposal.
I mean,
Jan, and I'll come to you, Sarah.
I mean, just the other very specific
and I've got James as well.
Question I had. So I'll just flip back. But in terms of understanding the changes, is it right in understanding that one of the biggest changes is that stormwater and flood protection is going from a catchment basis to a citywide basis? So actually people in like the central city are paying for a lot of stormwater and flood protection that is across the city. Is that, I'm just trying to understand what the key driver is to the significant difference from last time. And my understanding is that we've opened up some of the catchments more citywide, or
the biggest driver is there's two things. There's the changes to the capital program, but also there was what we talked about in the last briefing around growth. And compared to the 2021 policy, in the long term, growth is projected to slow. So the first 10 years, it's about the same, but as we move further out, Stats NZ are projecting a slower rate of growth, which is having an impact on those charges because essentially it's been spread across less households than it was in 2021. So those are the two big drivers to the changes. The catchments, they don't make that much difference. If we changed them, it would split it slightly differently, but we'd still need to collect the overall amount.
But I'm looking at like the Linwood East catchment, and specifically stormwater and flood protection's gone up from $752, and it was $724 in 2016, $752 in 2021. It's gone up by $6,000, $6,717. So
we're going to need we need more. We're not going to solve this. We're not going to solve this today. So what I'm going to do is I've got James and then Sarah. Yep. So James and then Sarah, and then I want to leave this laying on the table so we've got time for a workshop, because another workshop, and I apologise for that, but we're not going to land an outcome today. James.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And I agree that could be a good idea. Answers to these questions, though, might help frame that for me, but I think that's a good suggestion from you. Kind of following on from what Andre had said, look, we have a goal to have 20,000 residents living inside the central city inside the 4 avenues by 2026. We currently have about 10,000, so we're clearly on track to fail to meet that target. I guess I have 2 questions, and really one is, how does this draft policy take into account the council's own objectives to encourage that residential development inside the central city? And 2, what has changed since our last briefing session on the DC policy relating to that central city development, given the sentiments that I expressed around that, and it was obviously echoed pretty clearly by the council as well?
So in terms of the charges, as we talked about in the previous briefings, the big change has been to the increase in capital costs and the decrease in growth. So again, changing the catchments wouldn't necessarily drop the charges. If there is a strategic goal that council would like to achieve, like encouraging more investment in the central city, a rebate scheme...
20,000 residents inside the CBD by 2026. I hope that underpins everything, because that's what we shouldn't have goals if they're not known.
Can I just add to that, Mr. Chair? There will be some local, it's a priority development area for the local area planning program. So the central city will have that. And also, as Alan's just outlining, the better way of addressing DCs for the central city would be through a rebate policy. And that's what was there last time in addressing DCs in the central city, where they were rebated.
Yes, but the issue is that we don't have that. Like the council, chose to discontinue that. So I guess my question is, and it's not really, I'm not meaning to be belligerent about it. I guess I'm just wanting to get some clarity about how this draft policy aligns with our own council objectives that we've consulted on and the council's made a decision around. So I'm just trying to make sure that we've got alignment with our own objectives as a council, with reflected in the policies that are drafted.
So we'll bring that back as part of the workshop.
Okay, so I've got Sarah, and then I'm keen to move this on.
I'm just thinking, thing that we've heard that the catchments wouldn't make much of a difference, and some of this is over catchments. What is the process that you go through for doing this is pretty prescribed. Like, you can't just do random stuff just because we kind of want it, right?
Yes.
So how prescribed is it? Then what evidence do you need for all of these?
So in terms of the catchments, we do have a fair amount of discretion within the LGA, but we have to be able to defend any catchment configurations that we have on the basis that people are paying for infrastructure that they benefit from.
Yeah.
Beyond that, everything out, the charges that are in the policy have to follow the methodology that is set out in the LGA, and that is quite prescribed.
Yeah.
So we can't just kind of decide that our charges are $20,000 across the city. That would be a cap, which council could choose to do following consultation. But any cap of DC charges is revenue foregone, because you cannot make other developers pay for infrastructure capacity that is taken up by a development that you then chose not to require a full DC from.
So then all ratepayers would bear that cost.
So you can't require it from DC, so it'd be picked up by rates.
Yeah. Okay. So given that, if we deferred this and people were asking for sort of significant changes to it, how long does this, if people asked for more changes at the workshop, how long to get those changes done and then start going up for consultation? How much does this delay it, and what impact does that have?
So to redraw the catchments and then redo the cost allocations, redo the data entry, rerun the model. The model is not the simplest model to run. We're looking at probably 8 to 10 weeks from the briefing, and then we would need to, before we had a draft policy to the council, and then we'd probably brief you on the charges so that we had confirmation that everyone was happy, and then we'd take a report to Finance and Performance. That might be, say, May, and then we'd have consultation through June. We'd probably be looking at a hearings panel in August, and then council would need to adopt the final policy at their last meeting.
That's so we'd go to not having a policy until September, just so we can have one more workshop where we're probably going to decide not to do anything.
We can debate it if we want, but so it's just questions at the moment. Yeah. Okay, so I'll move that we defer this and bring it back to a subsequent meeting after another workshop. I just think there are questions. Aaron's happy to second it. Feel debate.
Yeah.
Yep.
Listen, I do want to get this right, but I think that getting it right is part of the consultation process and not necessarily something that's going to be helped by another workshop. We have had a number of workshops on this, and these issues have been canvassed, and we have had answers in the past. They may not be answers that we necessarily agree with, and we would like to be able to do things differently. But I'm really wary of us getting to the end of the council term and then having to sign it off, or if we decide not to at that point, then waiting for a new council to get up to speed and doing it then. For those who are really concerned about the central city, I draw your attention to the opportunity in Plan Change 14 to do mixed use in SOMO between Brougham and Morehouse Aves. That would have driven an enormous amount of investment and more residential really close to the central city, boosting businesses and those kind of things then. Unfortunately, that was an opportunity that council decided not to take, but there are consequences for that. Thank you.
As we'll put that, Yanni?
Well, we actually have identified that we will be doing spatial planning around Sydenham, so it's not a lost opportunity in my view. Actually, the choice was between doing it through PC14 and actually alienating a whole bunch of existing industry that actually create small medium business jobs in that community, putting live music venues out of business, not being able to expand the skate park, putting down panel beaters and a whole bunch of other industry that work in that community because of the impact of not going through a good process in terms of mixed use. And if you want an example, just look at what's happening to the local bars now in the St. Asaph area that are dealing with noise complaints from new mixed use residential that is impacting on their viability, right? So we haven't ruled out doing anything in that area. We've got other processes that we're in charge of as a council rather than the government imposed PC14. So I think it's a little bit unfair to criticise us around that. But anyway, I'm happy to support deferring this. I do think the key thing for me is making sure that when we go out with the options, there's sufficient ability for people when they make submissions to look at some of the alternatives, particularly around the smaller catchments. Like my reading of it is the stormwater and the flood protection catchment has changed so much that is skewing the pricing. If you just look through what's happening on the peninsula, Akaroa, and you can see some of the Hallswell and Linwood, you can see the changes based on the catchment in terms of what one of the most significant cost drivers, which is that stormwater and flood protection. So yeah, I think it's sensible to defer it. I don't want to delay this policy getting in place any sooner than it needs to, but I do think it's important we can have sufficient ability to address concerns through the consultation process, and I just want to get certainty that we can do that.
Okay, so can we put that motion? So all in favour? Against? Abstain from Sarah? Yep, that's carried. Thank you, sort of, to the team. Okay, Jane? And this has been moved by Sarah, seconded by Pauline, if that helps people move this along. This is the Climate Resilience Fund, the policy note